Right. In this section of the course, we are talking about long-lived assets, and, to be honest, we are making excellent progress so far. Whenever we consider intangible assets, there is one important distinction we have to make. There are intangible assets with a finite life, and there are also intangible assets with an infinite life. Examples of intangible assets with a finite life are software licenses, concessions, sport contracts, and so on. And examples of intangible assets with an infinite life are brand names, logos, and even a company's website. Okay, why is it important to make this distinction? Well, depending on the type of intangible asset we have, one with finite or infinite life, we are going to either amortize the cost for the asset in the same way we depreciate tangible assets in a specific number of years, or alternatively, we are not going to amortize the intangible asset at all, and we are only going to test it for impairment. That is, we are going to test if the asset's value decreased or not. Of course, amortization is applied for intangible assets with a finite life. If we have a beach concession on our books and it ends in 4 years, we would want the concession to be off our books once the concession ends in 4 years. Every year, a fraction of the concession's cost will be reported as an amortization cost. If, on the other hand, our company has an important and well-renowned brand name on its books, it wouldn't be able to amortize it because a brand name has an infinite life. It doesn't cease to exist. So, according to the IFRS and US GAAP, the firm will have to test the brand name for impairment every year. This is carried out by a specialist who basically values the brand name's worth and then compares the brand name's value to the value reported on the firm's balance sheet. If the current market value of the brand is lower, then the company will have to report a loss in the current year and decrease the value on its balance sheet. That's quite dangerous for listed companies, as this potentially erodes earnings in a very significant way. A very interesting case, which highlights the importance of impairment testing, is a project I worked on a few years ago. I was part of a financial advisory team whose role was to investigate if the impairment tests carried out for a company's brands throughout the years were performed correctly. The company operated in the fashion industry, and the fact that it owned world-famous brands, valued in a really expensive way on its balance sheet, allowed it to continue to operate for several years without declaring bankruptcy. Every year, the impairment test defended the valuation of these brands and showed that they are not worth less than their balance sheet value. However, the suspicion was that the impairment tests were carried out with a very aggressive hypothesis, and hence the actuary was carrying out the valuation in a company-friendly way. If he or she had come up with values that are lower than the ones the company had on the balance sheet, then the company would have had to recognize a loss in its P&L, and its equity, which was quite low, would have become negative, which would have meant bankruptcy. Instead, the company continued to operate for several years until it declared bankruptcy. These several years of additional accumulated losses resulted in even higher losses for the company's creditors. So, yes, impairment tests can be quite important in certain situations. In our next lesson, we'll discuss the revaluation model. Thanks for watching.